Are we the result of the past, or is the past the result of us? Tonight, a paradox. Does the past shape us, or are we shaping the past? If the past fixes us, identity is stable, justice is clear, prediction works. If we shape the past, memory is clay, justice is fragile, certainty is theatre. Two views, one reality. Let's press on it. Introduction and ground rules. Welcome to the Opposing View and the Mind Bend series. I'm your new host, David. Our format is simple. Each guest opens with a statement. Then we move into exchanges, challenges, historical case studies, and thought experiments. We'll pause halfway for a brief synthesis and then push harder. Rebuttals, cross-exam questions, a lightning round, and closing statements. Stay till the end to get the thought experiment to test the proposed truths for yourself. Our topic again. Are we the result of the past, or is the past the result of us? Dr. Bauer, you defend the view that the past exists independently and determines the present. Dr. Iliya, you argue the past is largely constructed by present minds, through memory, narrative, and interpretation, an insight resonant with Buddhist thought. Dr. Bauer argues that the past is objectively real, and causally determines us, materialist, causal determinism. Dr. Iliya argues that the past is, to a significant degree, constructed by present minds and social narratives, constructivist idealism with Buddhist perspective. Dr. Bauer, the floor is yours. Opening statement. Dr. Bauer, determinist or past first?
Thank you. I'll begin with a simple proposition. Causes precede effects. The universe evolved long before any of us arrived, and its prior states constrain what can happen now. It is not merely that we remember the past, rather, we are the result of it. Genetically, culturally, geologically, historically. The ice ages shaped our migrations. The migrations structured our languages. The languages carved our categories of thought. To deny this chain is to deny the very conditions under which we speak. First, consider biology. Your DNA is not a negotiation with the present. It is a palimpsest of ancestral choices and accidents, mutations filtered through relentless selection. Your temperament, your predispositions, even your vulnerabilities are not authored by your current preferences. They descend from prior conditions. Second, consider institutions. Legal systems, scientific norms, and economic arrangements stand on layers of precedent. We do not invent contract law fresh each morning. We inherit frameworks. Then, and only then, do we modify them. The past sets the coordinates, the present adjusts the tuning. Third, consider physics and time. Even if we debate interpretations, there is a consistent order. What has happened constrains what can happen. You cannot choose to have not been born. You cannot decide today that the volcano did not erupt in 1815, that the monsoon failed last summer, or that yesterday's data does not exist. You can reinterpret, but you cannot unhappen what has happened. The causal arrow remains. Now I anticipate the objection, but Dr. Bauer, memory is unreliable, and narratives are constructed. Yes, memories are fallible, and interpretations shift. However, unreliability of recollection does not imply inexistence of the event. The fact that we misremember a war does not mean no war occurred. Likewise, the fact that we refine our accounts of 2008 or 1914 does not render those years products of our current imagination. Instead, it shows a simpler point. We struggle to see what happened, but our struggle does not fabricate the happening. Finally, a note on human freedom. Recognizing causal inheritance is not fatalism. It is clarity. Our agency operates inside constraints set by earlier states. We are not authors of the past. We are readers who annotate the margins, sometimes brilliantly, but the chapters were written before we opened the book. Thank you.
Opening statement. Dr. Iliya, Idealist, past as story.
Thank you. I share Dr. Bauer's respect for causality, but I will argue something subtler and, I think, truer to our lived reality. The past that actually governs us is not a warehouse of fixed facts. It is the story we tell about those facts in the present. Let me make 3 moves. First, a Buddhist lens. In Buddhism, we meet the principle of dependent origination. Phenomena arise interdependently without a single solid essence. Memory is one such phenomenon, arising now, shaped by context, emotion, and use. This means that the past that matters to you is not some inert slab. It is an ongoing construction. It is remade each time you recall it, each time a society retells it, each time evidence is reinterpreted. The past is not an object behind glass. It is an activity happening now. Second, cognitive and social construction. Individual memory is notoriously reconstructive. At the social scale, we do something similar. We narrate, we simplify, we assign cause and blame. In hindsight, we declare inevitabilities. We tell coherent stories about 1914 after the fact. During the July crisis, causes were foggy. Options seemed multiple. It is only later that we compress contingency into, of course it led to war. The narrative is clean in memory because complexity was shaved away by need, by ideology, by the victor's archive. The past that governs policy, identity, and conflict is this cleansed narrative. In that sense, the past is the result of us, of our present storytelling needs. Third, prediction versus explanation. We imagine that explaining the past is easy because narratives fit neatly backward, yet we are reliably surprised in real time. That contrast shows something important. The neat past we lean on is produced after events settle, not discovered during them. Strikingly, certain futures, especially where structure dominates, like demographic trends or compounding technological curves, can be forecast more reliably than the tangled motives of last year's crisis. Counterintuitive, yes, but revealing. It suggests our past is tidy in memory more than it was in reality. Let me be clear. I am not saying nothing happened. I'm saying the past that acts on us, the past that shapes identity, policy, and possibility, is the past as constructed now. We are sculptors of our inheritance, not merely recipients. We do not just read the book, we keep editing the foreword that tells us how to read the chapters. That foreword, revised today, changes everything. Thank you.
Exchange round 1. Clarifying claims. Thank you both. Dr. Bauer, a quick challenge to Dr. Iliya.
Happily, Dr. Iliya, you've emphasized reconstruction, yet you also concede events occurred. If the eruption happened in 1815, how can the present construct the past in any substantial sense? Isn't your position collapsing into, we sometimes misremember facts, which is trivial?
Fair push. I am not saying anything goes. I'm saying the operative past, the one that directs behavior, is the narrative layer. For example, nations act on myth-infused histories. Courts rule using precedents framed by current judicial philosophies. Even scientific paradigms shift what counts as a relevant prior. So, yes, events occurred. However, what those events mean, which ones we elevate, and which causal arrows we highlight, these are present constructions, and they wield power.
But meaning is not the event. You can change the caption under the photograph, but not the photograph itself. Nations misuse history, but misuse does not make history plastic in the way you imply.
If the caption changes how every viewer acts, votes, and fights, then the caption has become part of the past that matters. The photograph sits in an archive. The caption moves the world.
Exchange Round 2. Historical Case Studies. Let's ground this. I'd like each of you to present one historical example and then respond to the other's choice. Dr. Bauer.
I'll choose the 2008 financial crisis. Leading indicators, housing leverage, opaque derivatives, mispriced risk, were measurable. They accumulated over years. The eventual crash was overdetermined by these past conditions. We can debate interpretations, but the material setup was not invented by our present minds. It was there, causal, constraining.
And yet, as you know, many smart people did not foresee the exact break. After the crash, we told clean stories about moral hazard or irrational exuberance. But during 2006 and 2007, the causal graph was murky and contested. The post-crisis narrative then guided regulation, blame, and identity. What counted as the cause hardened after the fact. That hardening is what I call the construction of the past. My example? The July crisis in 1914. In real time, leaders perceived a maze of partial commitments and ambiguous signals. Only later did we distill an inevitable path. The story of inevitability is a construction. It shapes subsequent treaties, education, and national myths. Again, the operative past is the narrated past.
I accept that after-the-fact stories tidy complexity, but that does not touch the underlying claim. Material conditions constrain outcomes. If 2008 was overdetermined, that means past conditions did the heavy lifting. Likewise, the web of alliances in 1914 was itself a prior state constraining choices. Even your example affirms my thesis.
And I accept that constraints matter. My point is that the selection and weighting of which constraints explain the crisis emerges later, shaped by present agendas. That weighting becomes the past we teach and act upon. In that important sense, the past is the result of us.
Synthesis. Midpoint. Let me summarize what I am hearing. From Dr. Bauer. Past states exist independently and constrain the present. Our imperfect stories do not erase hard causality. We are the result of what came before. From Dr. Iliya. Events occurred, yes, but the past that shapes action is the story we assemble now through memory, institutions, and ideology. In that pragmatic and psychological sense, the past is the result of us. So far, attention. Hard constraints versus narrative selection. Let's deepen the friction. Rebuttals. Round 1. 2 minutes each. Address your opponent's strongest point directly. Dr. Iliya, you first. Hit the causal constraint head-on.
Dr. Bauer, your strongest point is that constraints from earlier states channel what can happen now. I agree. What I contest is the leap from constraints exist to we are simply the result of the past. That phrasing hides the active, present process of meaning-making. Consider trauma therapy. The biological event may be fixed, yet reframing its meaning, now, modifies behavior, physiology, and future choices. In that sense, present interpretation retrofits the past's power. Furthermore, your photograph metaphor assumes a stable vantage point, but vantage points change the photograph's relevance. A war memorial, photographed from a child's eye, differs in meaning from an aerial shot. Which shot becomes the textbook image is a present decision with real causal force. The past, as an operative meaning, is authored now.
Thank you. Dr. Bauer, address Dr. Iliya's best point. that the narrated past drives action.
The best point on the other side is that narratives steer behavior. That is true. However, narrative power does not imply ontological dependence. The world does not become plastic because we mislabel it. Treatment can help a patient reinterpret trauma, yes, but the underlying injury occurred. Moreover, effective reinterpretations often succeed precisely because they acknowledge facts rather than rewrite them. The constructivist move smuggles in a confusion. Because meaning is added now, the past is the result of us. No, meaning is not ontology. Finally, even narrative choices are themselves products of prior conditions, education, media ecosystems, institutional incentives, all inherited. So even the act of constructing the past is past-driven. Irony noted.
Buddhist interlude, illusion, time, and the self. Dr. Iliya, bring in the Buddhist angle more explicitly. Is the past is an illusion, your claim?
Not an illusion in the trivial sense. Events happen. Rather, in Buddhism, time and self are understood as dependently arisen. The self that claims ownership of a memory is itself a process, not a discrete entity. Likewise, the past is not a solid block behind us. It is a constellation that appears coherent when conditions align. When those conditions shift, new evidence, new needs, the constellation rearranges. The stars remain, yet the picture changes. What governs us is the picture.
But again, the stars are there. Your constellation metaphor concedes my point. Reconfiguration alters interpretation. It does not rewrite stellar positions.
Except that navigation decisions follow the constellation, not the raw star field. Sailors steer by patterns, societies steer by stories.
Thought experiments, lightning round. Let's quick fire a few thought experiments. Keep answers crisp. Ship of Theseus. If we replace each plank of a ship over time, is it the same ship? Dr. Bauer.
Yes, because continuity of function and causal history ties it together. The replacement process is part of its identity.
Dr. Iliya.
It's the same ship because we decide to treat it as such. Our naming convention, our present choice, secures continuity. Absent that convention, the identity claim dissolves.
Grandfather paradox. If time travel were possible and you prevented your grandparents from meeting, what happens? Dr. Bauer.
The paradox exists precisely because past events fix the present. Violating them collapses the logical structure.
Dr. Iliya.
The paradox reveals our dependence on narrative coherence. We cannot hold two incompatible stories simultaneously. The mind protects one story of the past to keep the present legible.
Hindsight versus foresight. Why does the past seem obvious in hindsight, but opaque in real time? Dr. Bauer.
Because data accumulates after the event, enabling cleaner models. Post-event clarity doesn't mean the event was uncaused. It means causation becomes easier to see.
Dr. Iliya.
Because we write cleaner stories afterward. Our brains compress ambiguity into causal arcs. The tidy past is a product of that compression.
Future versus past. A counterintuitive claim. A claim surfaced earlier and deserves pressure. Sometimes the future can be easier to predict than the past is to explain. Defend or reject. Dr. Iliya.
I'll defend a qualified version. Certain structured futures, population aging, the march of a technology, once it achieves escape velocity, compounding impacts, are forecastable with better reliability than the tangled motives of a recent crisis. In contrast, explaining last year's coup can become endless because explanation competes with ideology. We keep rewriting the past. We do not keep rewriting the actuarial table with the same ease.
Dr. Bauer.
I'll reject the framing but keep the kernel. Some long-run structural trends are forecastable. However, that is because they are the product of robust past conditions. If anything, that supports my view. The future becomes legible when the past's constraints are strong and stable. When constraints are weak or interacting chaotically, both prediction and explanation suffer.
Dr. Iliya.
Notice, though, that when we are forced to predict, we sometimes weight structure properly. When we are allowed to explain after the fact, we weight ideology. The difference is the present use case, not the past's ontology.
Cross-examination. Each questions the other. 2 pointed questions each. Dr. Bauer, you first.
Question 1. If you had to teach a course on 2008, would you refrain from stating any primary causes on the grounds that they are present constructions?
No. I would state primary causes and also teach why the list keeps shifting, how political cycles and new evidence produce revisions. The meta lesson is that the cause map is live code, recompiled in each era.
Question 2. If a nation's myth diverges from archival evidence, do you treat the myth as the past?
I treat it as the past that governs behavior until corrected. Then I study the correction process, who has the authority to update the narrative, and how that authority is gained.
Dr. Iliya, your turn.
Question 1. You say we annotate the margins of a book already written. Who decided which chapters count as the book and which documents stayed in the drawer?
Fair. Archives and canons are curated, but curation does not create the events. It creates accessibility. My argument survives. The events constrain us whether or not we canonize them.
Question 2. If reinterpretation today durably changes citizen behavior tomorrow, reducing conflict or healing injury, do you still insist that we are simply the result of the past, rather than acknowledging that present meaning retroactively reshapes the past's practical force?
I acknowledge the practical force changes. What I refuse is the idea that the event's existence becomes dependent on our meaning. We reshape consequences, not occurrences.
The personal register, memory and identity. Brief personal register. Each of you. How does your view play out in an ordinary life? Dr. Bauer.
Think of learning a language. You inherit grammar. You cannot choose to have grown up with different phonemes. That prior exposure limits accent and shapes cognition. Agency thrives by respecting constraint, choosing tools that fit the inherited structure rather than pretending it isn't there.
Dr. Iliya.
Consider family stories. 2 siblings remember the same childhood differently and therefore become different adults. The event list could be identical. The narrative is not. Therapeutic reframing can loosen compulsions. The practical past, the one that acts, is the one told now.
Rebuttals. Round 2. Sharper. Final extended rebut. Tales before closings. Dr. Iliya, then Dr. Bauer.
Dr. Bauer, throughout you have urged solidity. DNA, physics, archives, I accept all 3. But your view underestimates how present use reweights the archive. A legal precedent ignored for 50 years is effectively dead until resurrected by a new court. A scientific anomaly dismissed by consensus is not part of the story until a paradigm shifts. A community's origin myth shapes behavior more than any deisty ledger. So yes, there are stars, but our present constellation governs the ship's direction. If we want better futures, we must take responsibility for the constellations we draw.
And I worry your view overestimates narrative power. The glacier advances whether or not we caption it. The pathogen replicates whether or not we narrate blame. We change captions more easily than we change ice or RNA. It is precisely because reality resists our stories that truth remains a useful concept. A society that treats stories as sovereign will eventually crash into the reef of the real. To navigate well, we must honor both chart and coastline, and the coastline came first.
Closing statements. Closings now. Dr. Iliya first.
We inherit facts, yes, but we live in meanings. The past that governs behavior, the past that builds nations and breaks them, is the past as configured today. Memory is a living process. Culture is a living process. History is a living process. To deny this is to pretend that the caption does not steer the viewer's heart and hand. If we are serious about responsibility, we must accept that we keep co-authoring the past that acts on us. That is not relativism. It is maturity. We don't get to rewrite events, but we absolutely rewrite the story that decides what those events mean, and therefore what we do next.
Thank you. Dr. Bauer.
Meaning matters, stories matter, but reality set the stage. Causality is not a style choice. We are the result of the past in the most basic sense. What came before constrains what can be now. Narratives can clarify those constraints or obscure them. They cannot abolish them. Wisdom begins with humility before the given, before DNA, geology, institutional momentum, and the stubborn facts of physics. We gain freedom not by pretending the past is our product, but by understanding it, honoring it, and then working within and against its limits to make something better.
Are we the result of the past, or is the past the result of us? Perhaps both claims speak to different layers of the same reality. Beneath, constraints set the channel. Above, stories set the sail. Your task, listener, is to notice when you need to study the river and when you need to adjust the canvas. Thank you to Dr. Bauer and Dr. Iliya. If you enjoyed this exchange, subscribe and share. And if you didn't, especially share. Until next time.